Hi there, thanks for joining. In this video I'll tell you something about the importance of grays. We see the world in 3 dimensions thanks to the interplay of light and dark. So you could say everything you see has a certain kind of value from dark to light. Well, in painting and in drawing we call this tonal values. So when something is very dark, it has a dark tonal value. When something is very light, it has a light tonal value, and you can have all kinds of values in between. So you could say we see these 3 dimensions thanks to the tonal values. And when we're painting or drawing and we replicate those tonal values correctly on our canvas or paper, then we can create a 3-dimensional world on a flat surface. Now, if you make mistakes in judging the tonal values, then your painting will look flat. So, for realism, tonal values play a very big role in your painting. Almost the biggest role. Tonal values are, for instance, way more important than color. And color is great, of course, but when we make this video black and white, it still looks 3-dimensional on a flat surface and it looks logical. And you can get used to it very quickly even. So the colors are great, but they don't matter that much. The tonal values do matter. Now, and guess where do people make most mistakes when painting and drawing? Tonal values. And that's no shame at all, because it is very difficult to judge tonal values correctly, because our mind gets tricked all the time. When you see a very dark area and you see a slightly lighter color in that area, you could think that that lighter area is rather light. In reality, it is still rather dark. Our mind gets tricked by the surrounding tonal values. And when we look at a slightly darker part in a very light surrounding, then we might be tempted to paint that way too dark. And that's just because you see a slightly darker part in a largely light area. So simple mistakes in perception of tonal values can make a painting look flat and unrealistic. Let us take a look at this painting of Rembrandt. And you see the whites of the eye. We would think the whites of the eye are white, but look how dark Rembrandt has made these eyes, the white of the eyes. And also it contains more color than you would imagine. So if Rembrandt had made this white of the eyes white or too light, then his painting would have looked very unrealistically. But the fun thing is you can train your perception of tonal values by practicing with simple exercises and just by painting in black and white and in grayscales. And that's what we're gonna practice in this video series. Just like the old masters, the pupils of the old masters back in the old days weren't allowed to use color. They first needed to learn to work in black and white only. And when they mastered that skill good enough, then they were allowed to start using color. So that's also why we will start in this video series with black and white only. So in this video we're gonna make a tonal value scale. In the second video we're gonna paint an apple with only 9 tonal values, and I will show all the steps, you can follow along with me. And in video 3 we're gonna step up a little bit and we paint a statue. And in that video I'll show you how you can start looking for some main values yourself. In video 4 we're gonna make a grayscale underpainting, and in video 5 we're gonna paint in color on top of that grayscale monochrome grisaille painting. And now I'm at that, the old masters often use underpaintings, and in underpaintings they already explored the range of tonal values. And that's a technique that's still used a lot by artists nowadays. And a lot of artists still start with a monochromatic painting, an underpainting, to explore the tonal values first and then work with color on top of that. Because it's way more easy when you only have to focus on one thing at a time. Tonal values are difficult enough, so when you've done that right first, then you can head over to the rest. Now, of course, the differences in tonal values are caused by the play of light, light and shadow. But also, some colors are more dark of themselves than other colors. When I turn the color wheel into a grayscale, you see that yellow, for instance, is rather a light color and blue and purple are rather dark. But of course, due to lighting conditions, you can also encounter very dark yellow colors, and the other way around, you can also encounter very light blue colors. Then there's another thing that's useful to know. A lot of colors that we see are way more gray than you would think. We call that desaturated or muted colors. But you could say those colors contain a lot of gray. And it doesn't always look like that. So something can look very colorful, even though most colors in the picture contain a lot of gray. But you see, all these colors, when I compare it to their most optimal vivid form, then you see that they are way more gray than you would think. So when you want to paint realistically, then a lot of the times you need to mute the colors, make them more gray. And you can do that in several ways. You can add the complementary color, that is the color that lies opposite on the color wheel. If you add the complementary color, then your color gets duller, grayed down. But of course you can also add a gray mixture. So black and white mixed together makes gray. But you also have other kinds of gray that you can buy. Or you can make a gray out of, for instance, ultramarine blue and burnt umber and a little bit of white. So there are all kinds of possibilities. But there are also colors that are so gray that you can hardly tell what color it even is. These are very gray colors. At first glance it isn't obvious what color it really is. Now, then of course you can also work the other way around. You can start with a gray mixture and then you can start wondering what is lacking to my gray mixture. Is it a warm gray or a cooler gray? Well, for a warm gray, maybe you need to add a little bit of yellow, a little bit of red or a little bit of orange. And for a cool gray, often you need to add a little bit of blue or maybe a little bit of purplish blue. So then you work the other way around. You start with a gray mixture and you add whatever you need. And for these kind of colors it is really handy to just have a tube of neutral gray or a warm gray or a bluish gray, for instance. Most people are used to paint on white paper or white canvas. But did you know that the white of the canvas is very blinding? If I put a light color on this white canvas, it looks dark. When I put the same color on a neutral gray canvas, you see that that color looks light, as it's supposed to be. So you already get the idea maybe. It can be very handy to make your canvas gray, neutral gray or somewhere in the range of neutral gray. Doesn't have to be that precise. Then you don't get blinded anymore, and that has more benefits because on a gray canvas you can also work from dark to light. On a white canvas you can only work from light to dark. On a gray canvas you can work from light to dark and from dark to light. And another benefit, maybe you recognize that, but if you don't cover certain spots, then the white of the canvas comes shining through, and that gives the impression that the painting isn't finished. And when you paint on a gray canvas, you don't have that, because at some spots when the gray shines through, it gives your painting a uniform look. Now, by the way, how do you make your canvas gray? That's by, you can add an extra layer of gesso. Most of the canvases nowadays are pre-primed with gesso. But whenever you add an extra layer of gesso, you get a way better painting experience. It saves you a lot of acrylic paint because you get more mileage out of your paint, so that's already good. But you can then, of course, also choose to add a little bit of acrylic color to your gesso. And if your gesso is white, you can add a little bit of black or neutral gray, and then you get a nice gray gesso on your canvas. Now let's head over to the first exercise. We're gonna make a tonal value scale. And by making a tonal value scale, you learn to get a feeling for when is a color light, when is it dark, and that kind of stuff. You learn to balance. But another great thing is that at the end you have a tonal value scale, and you can use that tonal value scale just to hold it in front of your subject to check how light or dark a color really actually is. The materials we use for the first exercise are a palette, acrylic paper. Of course, we need some brushes. We need black and white paint. I've got titanium white and lamp black. A palette knife to mix the colors. Also, we need a bucket of water and some paper towels to clean our palette knives and brushes. First, I draw 1, 2, 3 boxes. Then I draw 5 boxes, like this. Now I want to have 7 boxes, so I extend these again. Oops. There you go. And the last step is 9 boxes. So again. And you can do it way more precise, of course, by using a ruler. But for the example, this will do. Now on top of this pyramid, I want to make 3 tonal values: white, black and middle gray. A gray that's exactly in between the black and the white. White is simple. I already got pure white. I've already got pure black as well. Now I want to mix some white and some black paint to make a gray color that's almost exactly in the middle of the two. So I take quite a lot of white and a very tiny amount of black, because black is a stronger pigment than white. So I mix them with the palette knife, and I can always add more black if I want to. But if you add too much black straight away, then the white gets way too dark. Now I compare it with white and I say, oh, it's still rather close to the white. It's more towards the light side than towards the dark side. So that means that this cannot be a middle gray. So I have to add more black. I'll add more black. Now automatically, of course, it gets farther away from white. It's farther away from white and it's closer to black. But I have to try to see, is it closer to white or closer to black, or is it rather in between? But at this moment still I think it's closer to white than closer to black. But now I have to be careful. I just add very tiny amount of black because we're getting closer to a middle gray. So I make very small adjustments. You see, this is more towards a middle gray already, because it is farther away from white. It's not that close to black still. So this is a little bit already in between. And this is already a great exercise, because now you start to develop a feeling for these grays. When is it very light, when is it dark? And in the beginning it's very difficult, but it gets easier the more you practice. So I add slightly more black because I think it can still use a little bit of black. And then I think I'm already very close to middle gray. There we go. Now it's not close to white and it's not close to black either. I have the feeling that this might be middle gray. And the funny thing is, when you look to the neutral gray in the gray mixing set, you see that that is a kind of middle gray. Now, first thing I'm gonna do is I'll take some titanium white and I put that in this box. Now, of course, my paper is already white, but still we just fill it with white. The titanium white is always a little bit different than the white of the paper. Now I clean my brush. I wipe out excess paint on my paper towel. Then I make it a little bit moist in the water and clean the rest. Then I head over to the middle gray color and I put that in this box. Like this. I repeat the process. I wipe off the excess paint on a paper towel till hardly anything comes off. Then I just dip it in the water to make it moist. I don't want to pollute the water, and now
more paint comes off, and I wipe it slightly dry, and then it's good enough, and then I can clean enough. Then I can head over to the black paint, and the black paint is for this box. And there you have it, your first 3 tonal values. Because black is a strong pigment, it takes more time to clean the brush thoroughly. In the next step, we want to create more tonal values. We want to have the white here and the black over here, middle gray in the center, but now we want to make a value in between the middle gray and the white, and the value in between the middle gray and the black. I can fill this space with titanium white. That is a color that we already have, a tonal value that we already have. And maybe it's easy because the next steps are all the same, so I'll already fill this one with titanium white as well. In every row we get more tonal values, but the left is always white. Then I wipe the brush clean again. Middle gray, same story, we can add that to all the boxes in the center, because the middle gray will always stay in the middle of all the tonal value scales we make. And I wipe the brush clean again. Then I grab the black, and I can put the black paint in all the boxes that are at the extreme right. Like this. Clean the brush thoroughly. Now let's try to make values in between. We have this middle gray, we have black and we have white, but in this next step we want a value in between the white and the middle gray. So I can take some white, I'll add a little touch of black, and I have to be careful again. Always when you add a dark color to a light color, be very careful. You see, it immediately turns the white into a gray color. And now the question is, when is this white? When is this gray? A gray that is exactly in between white and this. So again, it's a matter of comparing. When I compare this to the white, I say that's rather close. When I compare it to that gray, I say that's rather a big distance still. So that means it needs a little bit more black. So I add a slight touch of black again, not too much. Yeah, this is reasonably good, I think. We have that tonal value. Now let's look at that tonal value. It's the same story. Here I add some white in between the black and the middle gray value. And now I start adding black to make the white dark. But this time this value has to be darker than that. And you see, now it's still too light because it's lighter than that value. So I add more black. So this way you already learn to compare values to each other, and that's very beneficial for your painting process. So it's close to the middle value, you see, and it's still rather far away from the black. So I need to add more black paint. Again, I try to be a little bit careful. See, now it gets darker already. It's slightly off of there, but still way off of the black. So I add even more black. And of course, when you add too much black, you can compensate by adding white again. But now we're a little bit off of the black, you see, but we're also quite a bit off of this gray. Are we more off of this gray than of this black? No, I think this is rather good. So now I take the brush. First I put on this middle value. So that's our value for in between these two values, the white and the middle gray. And now be careful, you cannot drop this down there, because in the next step we have to make two tonal values in between this, so this will shift to another tonal value. So that's the difference. So I wipe off excess paint, I make it moist in the water, wipe off again, and now I go to this tonal value, and that has to be in between the black and the dark, the black and the middle gray. Now we go to the next step. Here we need two tonal values between this and this. So I have this middle gray, I have this tonal value. Now I will adjust this tonal value a little bit. I grab all this gray paint, I'll put it over here because here I've got more space. And I add more white because I want to have a tonal value that's closer to the white. Now it already becomes more difficult. So we have a gray here that's darker than the white, that's good. And it's way lighter than the middle gray, that's good. And now I want to make another pile of paint over here. And I'll add a little bit of black again to make it darker. Now I have to start balancing. I want this one to be slightly more towards the middle gray. So I add a little bit more of black. Still can use a little bit more of black. Ever so slightly, because this one I want to make slightly lighter. It's all a balancing act, because this one now is a little bit close to that. But this is farther away from the gray than this one is from the white. So it still can use a slight touch of black. So now I look, is this further away from the white than this is from that? No, I don't think so. So I think this is good enough. I grab the brush again and I drop them on the paper. And if you make mistakes, by the way, that doesn't matter. You can do this practice a lot of times. Every time you do it, will get easier. And how silly it may seem, this practice is very beneficial playing with these tonal values. It's kind of a game, and it's very beneficial for the rest of your painting career because you develop a sense of tonal values. So you see, this is slightly darker than that one. And when I see it now, I think that this one could have been a little bit lighter. So I add slight touch of white. Now we head over to the dark side. We have the middle gray over here, and I just grab all this stuff, all this paint before it dries out, because acrylics dry out very quickly. And so I have kind of a mixture for here, and of course I have to make it darker. I'll clean my palette a little bit, but the middle gray, I leave it like that. But over here I'll add some more paint. So 2 steps, because I want to have 2 tonal values in between the middle gray and the black. First I'll add some black to this pile. That's already darker than the middle gray. I'll add more black, but I'll be a little bit careful. But now I first also want to adjust this one to get a total picture of the things, of the tonal values, because only then I can start comparing. You see, this one is even darker, but it's still closer to middle gray than black, so this one definitely needs more black. There we go. You see, that's better. It's now way off of the middle gray. Let's add a little bit of black still to this one, a very slight touch, to make it slightly darker, and then we make that one darker as well. See, now the distance between these two is slightly bigger. And then we have this one to this one is also rather big. This can use a little bit more black as well to make this one slightly closer to the black. Now we can drop it in the boxes again. So I first start with this one, the lighter color. So it's darker than middle gray. But you see, it's also slightly lighter than the box that we did before. That one, because this was a middle gray between these two. Then I clean the brush again and I head over to the dark value, this one. There we go. So a nice dark value part over there. This row will get more easy because, why is that? Because we have white and we have middle gray. We also have that on our palette. Now we can start searching for a tonal value that is in between white and middle gray. And that's easier than that you need to find two tonal values in between. First, I'm gonna make a tonal value that is in between. If I compare to the middle gray, I say it's rather close, and white, okay, it's a lot farther apart from the white, so it needs a little bit more white. And I compare again. I think this is rather close. So I keep this. Now I just grab a little bit of this gray paint over here to make a gray color, a tonal value that is in between this one and the middle tonal value. So this is slightly too dark. I have a tonal value that is a little bit off of this one and a little bit off of that one. So I think that is already kind of good. And then we need one value in between white and this one. So I grab a little bit of this one, this gray, put it over here. Then I'll add quite a lot of white because I have to make that gray color lighter. That's difficult because it has to be slightly lighter than that one and slightly darker than that one. Now I think it's close to that and it's also close to that. Maybe it can still use a slight touch of white. It's a bit off of that one and it's also a little bit off of that one. Maybe this one can use a slight touch of white as well. Slight touch of extra white. Yeah. And this one as well. So sometimes you have that, yeah, that's better. Maybe this one can be a slightly lighter still. This one ever so slightly as well. See, 3 separate steps. I think that is good. So now we can put them in the boxes. And I start with the light color because it's easier to clean the brush. With a light color on it, it's easier than cleaning a brush with dark color on it. You see? I just wipe off the brush. No need to do it very extensively because the next color is rather light as well. So I'll drop that in this box. There we go. Clean the brush again. Head over to the new tonal value that's in between those two. So you already see, with every row we get way more nuance. And that's also in your paintings, of course. And you can imagine that with the row of 9 values, you already can make some very nice paintings with only black and white paint. Okay, now let's look at the dark values. So again, I just grab all this paint. I just mix them together. First, again, let us start looking for a tonal value that is in between middle gray and black. Just add some black. It's a little bit darker than that one, but way lighter than black, so that's not good enough at this stage. But I keep a little bit of this for the value that we need here. Maybe that's handy. And then I'll only adjust this little bit over here with more dark paint. There we go. It's way off of the middle gray and it's also still way off of black. So this might be good. So, and then this is slightly lighter than this one, but rather a big step from the middle gray. So if I add a little bit of white to this mixture, now it is a little step from that one, but rather a big step from that one. So maybe this one needs to be a little bit darker, but this maybe as well. So if I add a little bit of black to this one, then the step in between these two gets bigger. But if I add a little bit of black to this one as well, then they get a little bit more closer, but then the step between these gets bigger as well, and that's what I needed. And then we need a value in between this dark value and the darkest value. So a rather almost black value over here. I guess something like this. So we can drop these values in the boxes. Again, I start with the lightest of the 3 values that I want to put in the boxes. So this one. Then I clean the brush a little bit and I head over to the next step. And then I head over to the last step. That's nearly black. So there we go. That was our final row of 9 tonal values from light to dark. Now, one final thing that I wanted to show is that I've painted this on a white paper, and on a white paper everything looks very dark. But when I add middle gray, it's just a little bit like my palette. When I do that all around this, and you don't have to do this, but it's just to show you the effect of surrounding colors on our perception. Now you will start to see that the light values also play a part. So do you see the difference? That now these light values also start playing a role. There's a fun thing you can do now, and that is wait till this is dry, and then you can cut out your 9-step tonal value scale, and then you can use your own tonal value scale as a tool to compare tonal values with photographs or objects in real life, that at least you can see, okay, this tonal value is maybe slightly darker than I thought, or way darker than I thought, or lighter than I thought. It's very useful to use a tonal value scale like this.
So I hope that was helpful. In the next video we're gonna paint an apple in 9 tonal values, and I'll show you everything step by step so you can follow along. Thanks for watching, see you next time.